I enjoy eating here in Southeast Asia so much more than I ever did in Europe. Now, I'm not saying the food itself here is better. I mean, I do think it is, but that's just kind of a personal preference. But what I am saying is that the food culture, right, the experience of eating food every day is vastly superior here compared to anywhere I've been in Europe. And there are two main reasons why. Number one is that it's actually affordable to eat out for every meal. And now, this is not one of those stupid videos about the cost of living in this region versus others. Like, I swear every travel TikToker has made a video that's like, oh my God, you can survive in Vietnam on $10 a day. And you know, that might be true, but those videos are very unfair to the local population. Because when the cost of everything is super low, that also means the locals aren't making that much money. So what seems basically free to someone from Switzerland isn't nearly as affordable to someone who's actually making their living in that country. So this video is not about that. When I say that food in this region is cheap, what I really mean is that eating out for every meal is as affordable as buying groceries and cooking for yourself. And that's a total game changer when it comes to traveling long term. So last year we spent a little over 4 months traveling around Europe, and we always felt like we needed to be cooking as much as possible in order to save money. But cooking kind of sucks when you're traveling, unless it's something you really, really enjoy. Like, always being in a new place with a new kitchen and new pots and pans and utensils and new grocery stores and everything, like, that just requires so much more mental energy than it does if you're just cooking in like a permanent home. So we started cooking a bunch at the beginning of our travels in Europe, but then we slowly kind of lost motivation and then started eating at restaurants all the time. And you know, we would try to find like the cheapest possible places that still looked like they were pretty good, but even then the costs just really start to add up. After every meal there was this little bit of guilt, like, oh, we just spent a bunch of money at this restaurant when we really didn't have to. And this guilt about how we should be more financially responsible and we should be cooking more was just there day after day. But now we've been in Southeast Asia for about 2 months and we haven't cooked a single meal since we got here, like not even one. And I feel zero guilt about that because we really wouldn't be saving any money by cooking. But how is that possible? You know, restaurants cost a lot of money to operate and you have a lot of overhead. So shouldn't eating out for a meal always cost more than making that same meal yourself? Well, here in Malaysia, at least, the answer is not really. There's just such a different food culture here and more types of establishments that you can reasonably eat out at on a regular basis. Let me give you 2 examples. So first of all, there's so much street food everywhere you go. And there's various levels of this. So, you know, on one end you might have just an actual cart on the street where you have to take your food to go. But oftentimes there will be like plastic tables and chairs set up. A lot of times you'll get real plates and real silverware. So even with street food, like, you do get a place where you can sit down and have your meal. But these places just have so much less overhead than a normal restaurant. So you don't have to pay for all that overhead along with your food. Now, the street food thing was more common in Thailand, where we spent about a month before coming here. But here in Malaysia, hawker centers seem to be a lot more common. So if you're not familiar with this concept, you basically have all these buildings all over the place that have a whole bunch of different food carts in them, like maybe 10 to 20. But then all the tables and the bathrooms and everything are shared among all of them. So now you've got all these places sharing the common expenses, which translates to your food being a lot cheaper. The closest comparison I can give in the Western world is like a food court at an airport or a mall, where you have a whole bunch of different fast food establishments, all sharing the same tables and building facilities and all that. But unlike a food court where the food is usually shitty and expensive and basically manufactured by these big corporations, the food at these hawker centers is really good, fresh, local food at a low price. Like the food at street vendors and hawker centers is so good. Like it's often better than what you'd get at an actual restaurant. Now, after traveling around Europe for a while, I haven't really seen anything like this, at least at this magnitude. Now, I know Europe is an entire continent with many different countries and cultures, and I'm obviously going to be making some pretty huge generalizations here, but I've been to 18 different countries in Europe, and I've never seen a street food scene quite like this. Like, yes, street food does exist in Europe, and some of it can be pretty good and pretty affordable, but at least in my experience, it tends to skew more towards like snack kind of food, like food that you might want to eat in between meals. Like you're probably not going to eat multiple meals a day, 7 days a week from street vendors. But here in Southeast Asia, we've done exactly that, and it feels very normal. Another thing that makes the food so affordable is that a lot of the local dishes are so simple and come together so quickly. In Thailand, most of the food we ate was some form of noodles and veggies, maybe some meat, that cooks in a wok in like 3 minutes. One of my favorite local dishes in Malaysia is Nasi Kandar, which actually originated in Penang, where I am right now. You can get this stuff all over the place, and everything is already cooked before you order. They just put some rice on a plate and cover it with some curries and some veggies, some meat if you want it, and it all comes together in about 15 seconds. And this stuff is so good. Like with this type of dish, it really doesn't matter that everything is already cooked, as long as you're going to a place that's, you know, constantly cycling through the food. Having food that's so simple and cooked so quickly translates to less labor and therefore cheaper food. A lot of the places we eat at literally only have one person working there. Like you have the same person cooking your food and dealing with the money. And even as a one-person operation, they can churn out tons of meals every hour. So how cheap are we talking? Well, we spent about a month in Chiang Mai, Thailand, and I'd say our average meal for like a moderate amount of food was about $1. And then for $2, you could get like a pretty big meal. And then $3, you're getting to the point where you're like stuffing your face. Now here in Penang, Malaysia, I'd say maybe add like $1 to all of those prices. So you know, for $2, you can get a moderately sized meal, and $4 is where you're going into a food coma. And here's the thing, the prices I just gave are actually on the more expensive side in these countries. Like in Chiang Mai, we stayed in a neighborhood called Niman, which is the kind of trendy, more upscale, more expensive neighborhood. Has a lot of like wealthier foreigners living there. And if you get out of that neighborhood, the food gets even cheaper. So you can get a meal for like less than $1. Now here in Penang, Malaysia, one of our Grab drivers was telling me that the food here is pretty expensive compared to where he's from in Ipoh. But it's not just the affordability that makes me enjoy eating in Southeast Asia so much more than in Europe. There's a second reason, which is that basically anywhere you go, you can have a really good meal very quickly. Now, I love eating, but I generally hate having a bunch of idle time surrounding a meal. Like I usually want to get out and explore, or maybe get some work done and not just be sitting at a restaurant without food in front of me. But here, if you eat at street stands and hawker centers, that idle time doesn't really exist. Like as long as you're going somewhere without a long line, you can usually just walk up to someone and order your food immediately. And then they'll bring you your food, and they'll usually ask for payment immediately. And then when you're done eating, you can just get up and leave and get on with your day. This is way different than my experience in most of Europe, where many of our meals seem to take forever. Now, obviously, there are differences between European countries. I'm going to be oversimplifying this quite a bit. For example, Italy and France seem to value having slower, more leisurely meals. And that's part of their culture. I'm not bashing it. I'm just saying that it's not my preference. Now, for a special occasion or a date night or a night out with friends, then yes, I want it to take a while so I can kind of savor the experience. But for just a random meal on a Tuesday where I'm eating either by myself or with Lexi, I usually just want it to be as quick as possible so I can go do other things. And I think Bulgaria is actually the worst offender here. Now, I love Bulgaria. It's one of my favorite countries, but the service at your average restaurant is horrible. I can't tell you how many times we've been sitting in a restaurant, we're done with our meal, and we literally can't find anyone to take our money. Like, the process of just trying to flag someone down and pay for our meal often took like upwards of 20 minutes. Like, that's not an exaggeration. Whereas here, like in that 20 minutes, you can literally walk into a place, order your food, pay, eat your food, and be out the door and leave in less time than it just takes to pay at a restaurant in Bulgaria. So as a long-term traveler, all of this comes together to put so much less pressure around meals. Pretty much everywhere we went in Europe, I felt this constant anxiety around picking a place to eat because the stakes were so much higher than they are here. Like, if we picked a place and it wasn't good, then we feel like we kind of wasted a good chunk of our day. And even if we did like the food, there was always that lingering thought that maybe we should have cooked and saved some money. But here, there's never any pressure to find a place to eat. Like, as long as we're in a city, we can usually just walk like 5 or 10 minutes in any direction and find tons and tons of places that are fast and cheap without sacrificing quality. And even if the food does suck, which is extremely rare, but it happens, it's like, whatever, we just wasted 20 minutes and $2. Like, who cares? Now, to some people, this might not sound very appealing. Like, I'm personally fine having every meal at a street stand and eating on a plastic table, but that lifestyle certainly isn't for everyone. But there are tons of actual restaurants here too, like casual restaurants, fancy restaurants, and everything in between. Any type of dining experience you might have in Europe, you can also have here. You can have that date night, you can have that long dinner with friends. Like, you're not losing any of that by being here. So I guess the point of this video is that if you think of eating out as a spectrum with extreme affordability at one end and luxury at the other end, you basically have so many more places at the extremely affordable end. Like, it's almost like unlocking a new type of establishment. And I'm sure you can find these types of places in Europe too, but here you don't have to go searching for it. Like, it's just there, it's ever present, it's everywhere you look, it's just part of the culture. And like I said, eating cheap food doesn't mean you're sacrificing anything when it comes to the food itself. This stuff is really, really good. Like, in my opinion, a $1 meal on the street in Thailand tastes just as good as a $30 bowl of pasta from a fancy restaurant in Italy. Now, that doesn't mean I hate eating in Europe. You can get good, affordable food there if you're in the right place. Like the pizza in Napoli, my God, I still dream about that stuff. Here's another video you can watch if you want to watch me eat 23 pizzas there. And if not, I will see you in the next one, and I'm gonna go get some lunch.